for joining us. Before we begin, I'm going to introduce our Korean and Armenian translators, and they will share with you in their respective languages how you can obtain their services.
안녕하세요. 한국어 통역일입니다. 이 모임은 한국어로 통역이 될 예정이오니 혹시 한국어로 듣기 원하시는 분들은 뒤쪽으로 오셔서 헤드셋을 끼시고 들으시면 되겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Բարի երեկո ձեզ, ես հայերենի թարգմանիչն եմ կրթաշրջանի եւ որևէ մեկը թարգմանության կարիք ունի, խնդրում եմ դիմեք ինձ, շնորհակալություն։
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is our 4th College Knowledge Seminar. It's a series of 7 that we have decided to partner with CollegeWise and offer our GUSD families and the wider community. So we are so elated that you chose to join us on this Tuesday evening to learn more about this hot topic on how to craft your extracurriculars. We will offer 3 more in the fall, so please stay tuned and check your Parent Square messages and the district-wide newsletters. Before we begin, we have...
Do you want the intro?
Yes.
Yeah, go to the
next one. We have a pre-survey that we are encouraging all our attendees to complete. This will help us gather the right data that we need to offer more of these wonderful opportunities for you. So please, before our presenters come up, if you can take just a couple minutes, it won't take more than 2. I tried myself. If you can submit this survey, it would just mean so much to us. And as you're completing the survey, I just want to recognize our district leadership officials in the room. We have our Executive Director of Secondary Education, Dr. Chris Coulter. We have our Equity and Access Coordinator, Dr. Cheryl Bailey. And I have to say, I just want to thank our district leadership for seeing the vision and the mission to provide this valuable College Admissions Hot Topics seminar to our GSD families and the greater community. So without further ado, our presenters today are Master Counselors from CollegeWise. We have Fayla Johnson and Kate Strzelecki.
Very good job.
And they have a wealth and a long laundry list of credentials and experiences. So I turn over the mic to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. How are y'all doing? Good. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We are going to be talking to y'all about building an impressive, let me grab this off. There we go. Building an impressive extracurricular portfolio and thinking about creative summer planning. And so we're going to talk about some tips and tricks of how to lean into your interests to build your extracurricular profile. We'll also talk about the importance of activities and extracurriculars when it comes to college admissions. And we'll also have some time to chat about what you can do over the summer as it quickly approaches, and have some time for Q&A as well. So before we get started, I did want to share a little bit about CollegeWise for those of you who this may be your first session that you came to. So CollegeWise is the nation's largest independent college counseling company. We have over 60 counselors and over 40 tutors that work one-on-one with students and families like yourself in every step of the application process. And our goal is to really take some of the stress and confusion out of the application process. Thanks for the survey. I want to share a little bit about myself, and then I'll pass it over to my colleague. So my name is Fayla Johnson. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a college counselor with CollegeWise. We're both in our Newport Beach office, so located a little bit away from y'all. And I went to UC Irvine, where I studied psychology and social behavior, and I minored in gender and sexuality studies. And prior to coming to CollegeWise, I was mostly working with nonprofit organizations doing college access work with lots of different types of students. So a long way to say that I love talking about college, and we're excited to chat with y'all tonight.
Hi everyone, welcome to this CollegeWise session. This is one of my favorite topics, so I'm really excited for this tonight. And my name is Kate Strzelecki. I am a CollegeWise counselor, again in our Newport Beach office. I work primarily with Orange County students, a handful of the LA and Northern California students. So lots of UC applications, common applications. I have been in college admissions since 2008, so quite a long time, but this is career number 2 for me, and I like to always share that with students that the average adult has 2 to 3 careers in their life, and that is also okay. So my undergrad degree is actually in environmental science, absolutely nothing to do with college admissions, but I love to work with families and with students and go through this journey and process with them. I love reading applications. I read for NYU for years and really enjoy seeing where students' strengths lie. And in the application process, really deciding how to build their strengths and highlight that. And that's something Fela and I are gonna talk about tonight.
Cool, thank you. All right, cool. So this is a little bit of our agenda for tonight. We're gonna talk about what are extracurriculars, the importance of extracurricular activities, the mechanics of what it looks like to share your clubs and sports and extracurriculars on the actual college applications. We'll talk about how you can be really successful in building your profile, summer planning, and then some Q&A. But before we go ahead and jump in, we'd love to get a feel of who's in the room. Can you raise your hand if you or your student is a 9th grader? Nice, thanks for being here, y'all. 10th graders? Hey. And 11th graders? Nice, good. Majority 11th. And any seniors? Probably not, but just in case. Okay, perfect. So that's gonna be helpful for us to kind of get a sense of where y'all are. So it seems like there's a good mix in the room, but predominantly juniors. Yeah, you go.
Awesome. Okay, so like I shared, this is one of my absolute favorite topics, is talking about extracurriculars and activities. And one of the reasons for that is that this is somewhere where you have so much control over this part of your application. Obviously, as you go through high school, you're gonna have your transcript, you're gonna also have possibly test scores. On your transcript, you're not only reflecting how well you do in your courses, but the rigor you're taking. This you have so much control over because this is sharing how you spend all the rest of your time, all the rest of those hours, whether it's in the morning before you go to school, whether it's in the afternoon, the evenings, your summertime, your weekends. You have tons of control over this aspect, and I try to really give my families and students that ownership. Is own that time. What do you want to do with it? So most of our students, as you're well aware, what is an extracurricular? Essentially, it's any activity you are doing outside of school hours. Again, I know some extracurriculars are done during lunchtime or things like that, but these are any club or organization, any part-time job, any sport you are doing, whether it's club or part of your school, music, dance, volunteering. Are you part of your church community? Are you helping with family responsibilities? Okay, neighborhood responsibilities. Are you babysitting? There could be so many things that you're doing with your time. Maybe you have a hobby that you love. All of these things can somehow be reflected in your extracurricular area. So Fela and I are gonna walk through how to do this, and also what we're seeing from so many universities now is they wanna see what they're referring to as evidence. They wanna see evidence that you're interested in something. So think of when you're doing things, don't just do them to do them, right? We're gonna think of evidence. So we're gonna go through these. And again, on the bottom, one of our little CollegeWise pro tips is some students put so much pressure on having something very official, like an internship, a research opportunity, But a lot of these can be right outside your door. You can volunteer for an organization, and hopefully that leads to a higher position or a part-time job or a responsibility. But also don't think that something outside your door isn't just as important as one of these research opportunities. So what are extracurriculars and what are they telling the admissions office? So again, I'll go back to, you have so much control of this. You're truly telling the admissions office, this is who I am, this is what I'm interested in, and this is how I want to spend my time. So a lot of times when you ask a student, why are you doing that activity? So I want everyone in the room involved in whatever activity you're in, why are you doing this activity? It might be to surround yourself with like-minded people. It might be because you love the sport you play. So many reasons, right? We might be doing something because our family wants us to do it, and that's okay as well. But we need to be aware of the why behind where we're spending our time. Interests, we also want to talk a lot about that this is a combination of your passion, your college fit, and your impact. All of these things are connected in some way. Colleges and universities are going to review your extracurriculars in your activity section to see if you're a good college fit for them. What are you going to do on their campus? So if you're, let's say, involved in the music program here at Glendale, an admissions counselor reading your application might assume they may be involved in the music program at our institution. And that could be the same for any club and organization. If you make an impact in high school in one area, they're going to assume you may bring that to their institution as well. When admissions counselors are reviewing your application, they're not only looking for you to be a good academic fit and make sure that you can be successful on their campus, they're also looking for the next roommate of someone that might work in the admissions office. And remember, there are current students that work in those offices, and they're reviewing your application, or they're looking at you as those tour guides that you see. They're probably taking a look saying, who do I want to be my roommate in a couple years? Or if I'm an RA, who do I want to have living in my hall? So you have to remember, they also want to look at students and find the best fit for their institution. Quality over quantity. One of my favorite examples for this is from, I believe she is an admissions officer at UCLA. And she talks about the fact that she ran a marathon. And when we think about someone telling us that they're going to run a marathon, they often don't just tell us they ran the LA Marathon. They usually also tell us when they started training. They tell us they did research to buy sneakers. They tell us how many hours they got up early in the morning to run. They may even tell you their training regimen and how much they had to stretch or eat differently. All of these things that came into play because they ran that marathon. So when you're writing and thinking about the activities you're doing, I want you to think about them like a marathon. All of those little pieces that come into play that have to be put together. The training, the time it takes, the running, the miles, the tracking, all of those things have to come into play for you to run the marathon. So as you're writing these descriptions of your activity, we want to not only know what the activity is, or that you're the captain of the soccer team, but what does that mean to you? Is it important to be a leader? Are you just very talented as a soccer player and want to make sure that you can lead the team to a championship? Or is this something super important to you in your entire life, you've wanted to do this, and your favorite thing is to do icebreakers with your team and build these great friendships? Those are the extra details that make the activity section so different for different students if you're sharing those details. So we would really encourage you, again, I'm going to kind of read this stuff on the screen as well. I'd encourage you to really think about the why behind these activities. Are you going?
Thank you. And to add on a bit more for your quality versus quantity, I'm so glad that there's a good amount of juniors in the space tonight because y'all have application season coming up for you in the fall. And a lot of the times, if I'm working with a student and maybe, Kate, you can probably attest to this too, if we get a senior that's joining us at the very beginning of their senior year and they're thinking about applications and they're getting ready to apply, they might come into that meeting and they'll say, Fela, well, today was Club Rush and I joined 4 different clubs because I'm ready to put them on my applications. And I'll ask them about the clubs and what did you enjoy about them? Why did you choose to join them? And usually it's, well, I thought I would look at college applications. And when it comes to, for those of you that are underclassmen, thinking about what activities you want to do and choosing your activities, you should really lean into the things that you really enjoy so that you can be involved and deepen that involvement in those extracurriculars. When it comes to the admissions process, an admissions officer is not necessarily looking to see how many activities you've done. So if you joined all 12 clubs at Club Rush, versus to see that maybe you did a handful of very meaningful activities that you learned a lot about yourself or you grew a lot through. And just like Kate was saying, being able to reflect that then on your application. So if you're thinking about your own extracurriculars right now, these are some questions that are important to ask yourself is, what are you getting out of the experience? How are you building confidence or leadership or different skills in that experience? Because that's what you'll want to share on your application down the line.
So we're going to put this up on the screen. This is a chart that mimics the activity section on the Common Application. So for those of you that are juniors that are getting ready, we would encourage you to open that Common Application as early as this summer. It officially doesn't kind of get launched until August 1st, but there are sections of the Common App you can start on now. And one of these sections is the activity section. So the activity section, as you can see, we kind of label, it's the activity, the organization. We go into the position you have. Are you a member? Are you a dancer? Are you the vice president? All those different things. Which years of high school did you do this activity? Hours a week, weeks a year. Students always have questions about this, but you can also average this out. So we talk to students about, is this just during the school year? Is this something you do all year or just in the summer? And then the important part is this description. So on the Common Application, it's 150 characters. It's not a lot of space. You do have more space on the UC application for this description. But for conversation's sake tonight, we're going to talk about the Common Application and this description in 150 characters. I'm sure Fela has lots of examples to give too, but we have some up on the screen. We talk about using lots of action verbs to start. Are you helping? Are you organizing? Are you playing? Are you responsible for? All right? Are you developing? All these action words to start these descriptions. If you have numbers of things like we grew our club from 13 members to 28, or we started off with this much money and raised this much money for an organization, putting that type of quantifiers in here is great. But also, I had a student this year do something that I loved, and she actually put a lot of personality into these. She talked about that she volunteers at an elementary school in the kindergarten class, and she did this all year. And she talked about how this one kid almost every week would literally wipe his boogies on her jeans. And she wrote this in her description. And she said that was her favorite moment because it was just this kid that obviously felt most comfortable with her. So also, don't be scared to give these a little bit of your personality. Why are you spending all this time on these activities? This is what it looks like. So we kind of broke this down for you. On the Common Application, there are 10 available spots for activities. There's a different section for awards or honors. So if you're thinking about, oh, I have some awards or honors, you don't have to put those in that section. Activity type. Again, you're going to list whether this is a club, volunteer, sport, what have you. Length of participation, we talked about that. Your position and description name. You also have a handful of characters. You can see it says 50 characters and 100 characters for that organization name and position. I also encourage students that if it's an organization name that is uncommon, give a lot of details. You have 150 characters, so you can give some details in that area where it says the organization name. You can say that it's a nonprofit that does maybe 2 or 3 things. Fill that in there. Hours spent, again, be honest and accurate, but also you can average them out. For some students that say, well, during the season when I play the sport, I do this many hours, and off season it's only this many hours. You can average those out throughout the year. And then there's also a question on there that says, are you going to do this in college? And again, be really honest about that as well. This is where the admissions committee and the admissions readers are looking at this application, saying, oh, the student really intends to carry on this interest they have when they come to college here. And what would that look like on our campus? So because I know everyone here has a phone, we carry around these wonderful portable computers now, if everyone can actually, I'm going to encourage this, if everyone can get their phone out, and even if you're a parent that is not with their student tonight, get it out for them. Do one of these for them. So I would encourage you to, in your notes section of your phone, write an organization. Write one organization you do some activity with. Anything. It can be Glendale High School music, Glendale High School soccer. It can be Boy Scouts. It can be volunteer for your church. It can be babysitting, pet sitting, responsible for your younger brother when you get home. The position. Are you a member, volunteer, goalie, athlete, dancer, musician? Write the activity type. What type of activity is this? The length of participation. So again, have you done this 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade? As much as it's really important and we're so happy you've done activities in middle school or elementary school, that is not an option on the Common Application. It only starts with 9th grade. So when students tell me, oh, Kate, I've done this activity since I was 8, you can write that in your description. The next part is a super important description part. And I would encourage you again, take time right now. If you had to write, and you'll see 150 characters is only about 2 sentences. And you can be very phrasy. You do not have to use full, complete, pretty sentences. So write, why are you doing this activity? What impact did this activity have? For some students, they'll write 2 things and they're like, yeah, that's pretty much it. And I'm like, well, what is the goal of this activity? If you're kind of having the writer's block of why I do it, what's the goal of it? Why are you attending this every week or month? What's the goal of that organization? And then also, is the organization's goal different from your goal? Is your goal to raise so much money or to learn a new skill or to elevate yourself in some way? All of these things can go into that description. So thank you for playing our little game with us. Hopefully this will start your list. You can move this. We encourage students to start this, even if you're in 9th grade right now. Start keeping a Google Doc. Write all of the activities you do from now until you're a junior in this Google Doc, and then all of a sudden you'll have your activity list ready to go for the Common App when you start that in a couple years. So, and juniors, this is a great thing for you to also start doing now. I'm going to hand this over to Fela.
Awesome, thank you. The activities list is super important. Y'all should definitely continue to add on. Just keep a note in your phone. It's so much easier if you're logging things consistently than filling out your application and trying to recall all that you've done. And even writing down some small wins. Like if you did really well in maybe your speech and debate, or something really cool happened in your club, or you pitched an idea and it worked out. Those are all things that you can write down, and those are all things that can be reflected in your activities. And you can also share things such as spending time with your family at home. If I have some students who maybe their parent or guardian's first language is not English, so they do a lot of translating on the phone or at the doctor. Those are all things that are still building a lot of skills that you can reflect on your applications. So we're going to move into talking a little bit about how you can approach this if you're thinking about your own interests and how to get involved. So the first question that you're really going to want to ask yourself is, who am I? A big loaded question, but thinking about what your interests are, what you do in your free time already, thinking about your favorite classes or things that you might be really passionate about, starting to think about what you value and what you like. The second step is going to be looking around you and seeing what resources are already available to you. So connecting with your teachers at school or your counselors to see what clubs or opportunities are already available for you here that you could take advantage of. And oftentimes, if it's not available here, it's something maybe you can create, or it's something that you can be referred out to into the local community. So thinking about your interests, thinking about what your local resources are that you can take advantage of. And then it'll be important to think about your schedule. We know y'all are super busy, and so as you're thinking about what you want to be involved in, it's important to be realistic and think about how much time you have to commit, how committed you might want to be to this, depending on what it is. The last step is going to be some goal setting. So within your extracurricular activity, your club, or maybe this is just a passion project that you do on your own, thinking about what are the goals that you want to set for yourself. And they don't have to be huge goals. It doesn't have to be you're building a robot. It could be maybe you're doing your research on marine biology on your own time, watching 3 YouTube videos a week and then writing about it. I had a student who really loved to crochet, and she would do it in her free time. And she is now online, and she's minoring in their entrepreneurship program, but she was always crocheting, and when we started to talk about the things that she's interested in, it was the main thing that she was doing. And so we start a club, go do something like that. We really looked inward and said, okay, well, how can you level this thing that you're already doing up? How can you add some structure to it? And so she just set a goal of how many different articles of things that she was going to make by week. And then she realized that there were certain causes that she was really passionate about. And so some of the money that she made selling these to her friends, she would then donate to those causes. And that was something that went on her application and eventually came out in her essays, and she learned that she really cared about entrepreneurship. So through your extracurriculars, you can really start to learn more about yourself, but I really want to emphasize that it doesn't necessarily have to be an official program or internship. It can be things that you're already doing that you're just willing to commit to and set goals for. Thank you. So if we're thinking about the grades that y'all are in right now, I know most of us are juniors, but I want to go through everyone. So for 9th graders in the room, you're getting started in your first year of high school. This is a good time to cast a really wide net and kind of explore, see what really is available to you, and try a couple of different clubs. I know I used my example earlier of my senior who joins a ton of clubs for college apps. 9th graders join a ton of clubs and pop around and see what you really like and what sticks, because that will help you start to get a sense of what you want to lean into a bit more. For 10th graders, this is when you're starting to, maybe you've done a couple of activities or organizations, and you're starting to see what you really want to commit your time to. Maybe that's your sport in a few clubs. Maybe that's an extracurricular outside of school. You're really narrowing down so that you can deepen your interest in that involvement and have more leadership within that role. Grade 11, you're gonna start to move into, again, narrowing it and leaning into it. So we talk about leadership titles a lot. Sometimes students ask, do you have to have a leadership role within clubs or the programs that you're a part of? And you definitely don't have to, because there's so many ways to be a leader within anything you're involved in. So that's why it's important to make those goals for your extracurriculars, so you can think, maybe I want to pitch an idea, or maybe I want to take initiative in a club where I'm not in a leadership role, but I'm being a leader, because that's something that can still be reflected later on. And then for moving into your senior year, that's when you're going to start thinking about exactly what Kate just had y'all do, how you're going to reflect it on your applications. So before we move into talking about summer and answering some questions, these are just a couple of tips or things to watch out for. The first one is taking the checklist approach. That's what I had mentioned earlier. Don't feel like there is X number of things that you're supposed to do in order to look good for college applications. You really genuinely should be leaning into the things that are going to be impactful for your own growth, and also where you're impacting other folks and you're able to reflect on that. We sometimes get questions of, is one activity or type of activity better than another. Maybe students are choosing between two things, and the same goes for that, is really lean into the things that you feel like you'll gain the most out of, and you'll be able to exercise your skills, lean into your strengths, and then be able to reflect them on the app. Don't try to fit the mold. So sometimes students are joining clubs because that's the one that everyone joins, but it's okay if you have, and it's okay and it's appreciated if you have unique interests or hobbies or things that you want to lean into that maybe are not considered a traditional activity. This one is the last one I just mentioned, is you don't necessarily need a title to be a leader. So even if you're involved in a club that meets once a month, think about, in that club meeting, how am I going to demonstrate leadership? How am I going to initiate a conversation or bring something up? Because that's something that can be in your activity description, in your essays down the line. And then the last one is to start early and think about summer, which we'll move into right now. All right, so we're gonna chat a little bit about summer. How many of y'all are excited for summer vacation? Yes, I see some hands. Yes. Okay, great. I feel like it's summer already because it's been getting really hot. But summer is a really great time for students to, one, relax, recharge, rest after the school year. But it's also a really great time to use your time intentionally and maybe do some of these activities or courses or programs that you weren't able to do during the school year, maybe because of your schedule. And so we're going to chat about some things that you can do around the summertime to really build up that extracurricular profile. So we'll share a couple of options. I want to be clear that just like the activities, these are not things that you have to do every single one of them. They're also not things that you have to do official programs for. These are just some ideas and some ways that students can spend their summer to be able to reflect it on their application. And colleges are only looking to see that students are spending your time intentionally and leaning into the things that you want to learn more about and enjoy. So one of the things that students can do over the summer is looking into academic and career development. So that might look like taking a community college course over the summer, or even an online course through Coursera or Udemy. Sometimes this can be career building programs or internships. It can also just be talking to a couple of your neighbors who are in careers that you think are interesting and asking them questions, right? It can be anything that you're doing that will help you develop academically or in your career in the future. Also, job experience was up on this last slide. Part-time jobs, for those of you that are old enough, are great ways to spend your summer and to spend your school year as well. Sometimes students can't be as involved in clubs and extracurriculars, maybe because they work. That's totally fine, and those are things that can also go on your application to show those same skills. Thanks, Kate. All right, and then lastly is thinking about ways that you can just really be creative with your summer. Like I said, it doesn't have to be an official program. Maybe you're like my student who loves to crochet. Maybe you're a student who wants to take up a couple art classes. I've had students who love to bake and they're doing recipe books or blogs. There's a lot that you can do with your interests that don't necessarily require a paid program or a program you're by, but being very intentional in writing down what you're doing, writing down how you're doing it, and setting specific goals for yourself to accomplish them. All right. So our tips for activities in the summer, the first is to think about your priorities. What are the things that you want to accomplish? What are you already committed to time-wise? Create clear goals for yourself. Earlier, Kate was sharing in the descriptions, if your club had 10 people, then you brought it up to 20 people, or if there's any numbers that can quantify what you've done. If you're setting goals and then you're reaching them, those are all things that can be reflected later on. Make sure you're wanting to center yourself instead of your resume, and that's what I've been, I think, sharing a lot, is make sure the things that you're doing are true to you and your interests, because another part of the activities outside of the activities list is a lot of colleges will ask you in their essays to share what's an activity that was really meaningful to you, Or tell us about a time where you impacted others, or tell us about a community that you're a part of. And if you've only done activities that here and there you stopped by because they had pizza at lunch, or maybe you weren't really doing things that you really cared about or were important to you, it's going to be really difficult to be able to reflect and write those essays. So centering yourself. Getting creative, and then lastly, being reflective. Making sure that you're logging what you're doing and making sure that there's always a why behind what you're doing, because that's what will be on your applications down the line. Cool. All right. Anything you want to add, Kate?
I'll add one thing.
Yeah.
Fela and I are going to open this up for questions, and as we realize that there's a handful of juniors in the audience tonight, we would really encourage you to ask us some questions now about how to describe an activity you have or how to place something. Something I'm realizing we didn't touch on during this was that we didn't really talk about the order. So there are, I'm going to go back to a slide, go back to the one with the grid. So something that we talk about with our students is the order, because you're going to have 10 spaces on the common application. And Fela can speak to this too. As an application reader, and I'm going to age myself here too, we used to actually print these out. And even if you scroll and read them on the computer, 5 activity boxes are on one page and 5 are on the next page. So you're really only looking at 5 per page. And I'll be honest, as a reader, I always spent more time on the first page than the second page of the activities. Whether it was purposeful or not, the ones on the first page always seemed more interesting, more impactful. The students always seemed more excited about them. When I flipped to the page, they were kind of the activities students didn't seem quite as excited about. And I would encourage you to think about that. As you're listing these activities, we usually encourage students to list the most impactful ones, the most current ones, and the ones that have the most longevity. Have you done this activity all 4 years of high school and it took up a lot of your time and dedication? If that's the activity, that should be at the top of the first page. That should be activity number 1. So I want you to also think about that order that you're going to put your activities in as you go through this. We talk about too, do we spread out the different sports if we have an athlete, or do you mix up those other clubs in between? And again, I really look to my student and say, what message do you want to send to the admissions committee about which of these activities was most important and impactful to you? So remember, as you're writing these down, as you're doing this, again, Fela and I would say do it on a Google Doc before you go and paste these into the Common App or the UC app. Some of them are harder to edit than others in different circumstances. So really give yourself a rough draft before you do this and check that character count. But Fela and I will open it up for some questions unless she has anything else to add.
Nope, you're all good. Any questions?
Community service opportunities or work opportunities. Do you have some key major go-to kind of resources that you can share with our families?
I do. I can send you, do you usually post the presentation? I can either send you and I can add in a slide with some links. One of my favorite ones, I don't know if Fela has one, is just for volunteer opportunities in your community, is Volunteer Match. You can go to Volunteer Match and literally put in your zip code or your town. I know everyone doesn't want to have to drive all around LA, but if you put the zip code in, it'll bring up a bunch of different volunteer organizations. It will also list, usually it lists the age level, so it will also tell you, I know that's a challenge for some students, to find organizations that allow students that are under 16 or something like that. So this also tells you who can actually volunteer there. So I think that's a great resource that I have, but we're happy to send some additional links. I'll let Fela share any she has.
Yeah, I love the Volunteer Match. Also, Teen Life is a great resource to use to scroll through and see different programs. Some of them are college campus programs, but some of them are also volunteering opportunities. And at the very end of our presentation, we'll have a QR code, and that will bring y'all to our website as well. In addition to what we'll send over to be shared with you, our website has a lot of resources as far as blogs. There's one that is specifically about summer planning and with our summer planning guide, and there's tons of resources that will be linked there as well. So we're happy to share those. Good question. Other questions? Yes. Yeah.
My daughter goes to an arts magnet high school, and it's part of her academic program. I guess she takes all these extra writing classes, but could that count as, I mean, I don't know how would one highlight that in an application, because it's part of her academic schoolwork, but it's also part of like a passion, extra interest.
Yeah, so the question was, she's taking a few extra like art and writing classes and where that can go on the application?
Well, it's part of her school.
Mm-hmm.
She goes to high school to 2:30, and then 2:30 to 5 every day as part of her high school. She takes it's all extra writing classes.
Mm-hmm.
It's still part of her school program, but it is like
An additional kind of commitment. Yeah, absolutely. And there are there's a couple of spots where that could work both on the Common App and the UC application. So I also work with a good amount of students that we're from Orange County, so Orange County School of the Arts, and it's kind of a similar situation where, they have additional programming that they do outside of those academics. So the first would be that if it's a class that's going to be reflected on their transcript and it's an academic course, that will go in their courses regardless. But I know a lot of those classes mean that they're also staying after, maybe they're doing really big projects. So things like that can be reflected in the activities list. For the Common App, that can be a matter of sharing writing project and describing what it was specifically and what they did, and just sharing that it's connected to the course. On the UC application, they have an other courses section for things like that, and it gives you the space to describe what the class is and the involvement in it. So I definitely recommend to put that into the activities list, as long as it's something that is like a big commitment outside of what she'll be doing generally in the classroom. Anything you want to add?
Those also, sometimes with those additional courses that they're doing, I would encourage your student to either, they can, if they're entering themselves in any type of like writing competitions, then they can list that in the activity, that even though they may have written it in the class, they can then say, I'm also submitting my work into competitions, that type of information. So that is what I'd probably encourage. If that was my student, that would be my recommendation. Even if they didn't get chosen, I think just the act of putting yourself out there, encouraging that confidence in your student, that would be my recommendation for that one.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good point. To what we were sharing earlier of how to kind of lean into what you're already doing and kind of add structure to your activity. And so maybe they are doing a lot of writing in their class, and they also are entering this writing into competitions. And maybe they also are posting writing on online platforms or sending them to like teen magazines. So there's a lot of options for that. And just like Kate said, it doesn't have to be that they're selected. It can show the initiative. So I really like that idea. Good question. Any other questions?
Have you been noticing a rise or a trend in more and more students putting a publication or a research, as part of their activities? And what's the impact of that when it comes to highly selective admissions?
I'll speak to the first part of your question, as if there's been a trend. I think that it really just depends on the student and it depends on their interests. We definitely encourage students to explore options like not even necessarily research publication, but doing research if they can, looking at online platforms to do so, or even just doing their own passion projects like we shared earlier. A lot of highly selective schools are looking at students who have had projects like that or research in that capacity. I don't know if you've seen a trend in your students, Kate, of more or less. It really just depends, I'd say.
I haven't necessarily seen a trend of that. I have seen students, I think the trend I've seen is students wanting those opportunities, but that they are either cost prohibitive or they're hard to find, and there's so many students interested in them now, or they're so competitive. The students I have had that have even done them with, most of the time it seems the students that are most connected to them and are enjoying them are actually through their own personal or community connections. I did have a student that had an uncle actually at the University of Delaware, so every summer for 2 summers she went there and did research. I don't even think it was published by the time she submitted those applications, but just her writing about that. She did apply to a neuroscience program. She's at University of Washington with a scholarship. So she did apply to highly selective. She got into some. She just chose to go somewhere else. Again, University of Washington has phenomenal biology programs and health science programs. So I think it depends on what the students' goals are. So I see a huge rise in students wanting those opportunities. I don't actually think right now that they're available. So I would just encourage students to use the resources around them, and then also take advantage of research they can either do on their own, research that they can do in their own communities, or volunteer for organizations and do research for free.
Great question. Thank you. Other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, so if my student plays a sport, because she enjoys playing it but doesn't plan on continuing in college, would this be a reason colleges may not accept her? Should she reconsider?
Reconsider how it's listed on the application?
Yes.
So the question was, if there's a student who plays a sport, but maybe they don't want to play in high school, is that going to, or excuse me, in college, would that impact their application? I would say no, they can still list their sport. Most of my students who are playing sports in high school don't intend to continue in college unless they maybe want to do a club sport or they're specifically doing athletic recruiting. And so no, they can absolutely still and should put their sport on their activities list, share what they've got out of it, what they've enjoyed, but it doesn't necessarily need to be something they plan to continue in. Yeah. That wouldn't impact that admission. Good questions. Other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter is going to study STEM, but her extracurricular is mostly music and arts. I just wondering how to list those.
So the question was, the student is thinking about studying STEM, but their activities are mostly music and art. Yeah, do you want to speak to it a little?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and then I'll share.
Music and art are phenomenal. Extracurriculars in general, I don't think there is a bad extracurricular. I tell my students to lean into whatever they're enjoying, and if that is where she's spent her time, I would have her share that as much as possible, that has been important to her. And I think it takes a lot for a student to actually share. I've had students before, on their application list that they only did something from maybe 9th through 11th grade, and then literally share in their description and say, I wanted more time to lean into something else. And it was time for me to kind of give up this hobby or this interest and spend my time elsewhere. And I think that's also really responsible and mature of the student to have that awareness. I'm sure students in the room right now can speak to, you're never going to have more time. The adults can speak to that too, right? So as a freshman, you're like, oh, maybe I'll have more time as a sophomore. As a sophomore, maybe I'll have more time as a junior. Juniors are like, absolutely not, right? So you're never gonna have more time. So that you really need to look at how you're spending your time and decide where you wanna spend that. Where can you spend that? I would encourage, how old what year is your student? She's a junior. So I would encourage that if there is anything that they can do in this summer or even in the fall that is connected to their STEM interest, and that can be, again, Fela mentioned taking a class on Coursera, taking a class on edX, you can take a class at a local community college. Anything that can share that this is something that they're passionate about and interested in, and reflecting that is great to show evidence on their application of that interest.
And I'll add that having some evidence or that academic interest is also going to be helpful just when it comes to some of the essays that they might have to write when it comes to applying as a STEM major. They might ask you what why do you want to study this major, and if they can speak to a personal experience or a class they took or a moment or experience that they had where they realized this is something that they want to study, then that would help strengthen the application. I really love when my students who are really involved in STEM are also involved actually in music and art, because colleges love to see students that are, they have that STEM experience, but they're also well-rounded and have explored their genuine interests and tried different things. And sometimes that might even help them think about what their major or career might be. Like maybe there's a way that they're combining a science and an art to think about like bioillustration and different types of things that they might not have thought of before if they were just strictly in a STEM or strictly in an arts. Other questions? Yes.
Follow-up question about the sport. When the student plays sport in the high school, how important is whether he's competitive? It's a JV or varsity, whether he's a captain or leadership, or as long as he can show his personal growth through the participating in the sport.
Exactly what you shared. So the question was, how important is it for my student to be successful in their sport versus just maybe enjoying the sport or playing for teamwork or playing to improve their own skill set? No, I think it's fantastic. There are students that have written phenomenal descriptions about joining a sport that it was like the first year their high school had the sport. So they were in a very good team and they did all their team development and they started off, but they had the best time because they learned teamwork and skills, and they picked each other up, and they had a losing season, and that was okay, and they learned how to accept that, and that might be a phenomenal description. So not at all. So I think that be really honest about what was the purpose of it. Like Fela said, most of our students, unless they know they're going to get recruited for Division I, Division II, play these sports. Most of our students will play club in college, and that is fine too. I also had a great student a couple years ago who got hurt. I think he was a junior when he got hurt on the basketball team. Or maybe he was a sophomore. He got hurt on the basketball team. It was his favorite thing to do. But he also worked for the school newspaper. So he decided to spend his entire junior year, when he couldn't play anyway, he was the manager of the baseball team, or the manager of the basketball team, and then also did all the photography and all the articles for the school newspaper, and did a social media site, did Instagram, and he absolutely blew it out of the water, and essentially did like sport journalism. And he had a phenomenal application and activity section. And so he loved basketball, and he's bummed he didn't play. But his activity section actually looked awesome after he stopped playing basketball, if that makes any sense. So no, lean into what you're good at, lean into what is being offered. I think that's something else Fela and I may have touched on, but maybe not enough. It's that colleges and universities are also going to look at what are your opportunities, what's available to you in your community, at your school. And very often we don't even look at the resources that are given to us by our institution, our school administration. So look around, see what your resources are right here. You have so many at your fingertips.
Absolutely. Other questions? Juniors? All right, well, if there's no questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all so much.
I'm going to put the post.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fela and Katie. And thank you again to everyone joining us tonight. This is one of my favorite topics also, not only because students can exercise so much control and creativity as they complete the extracurricular activity section of the college application, but I think it also allows the student to exercise a little bit of self-awareness, right? And the purpose and the intent of whatever they're pursuing. And yes, this is a college knowledge seminar, and we're all about delivering the hot topics and relevant information to families. But we also know that college is not the end-all, be-all, and it does define your success in life. So in all your extracurricular commitments, we're hoping that this discussion tonight has empowered you with the tools to have that heart-to-heart conversation with your student, with your parents about what it is you love to do, or what are the things that you're naturally a little bit inclined or adept at, and what does the world need today, and how you can use all of that to make a living. And that is all about Ikigai, and I'm just really a fan of the Ikigai concept, but we thank you so much for your time tonight. They drove all the way from Orange County just to be with us. And we will be uploading this, the recording of this presentation to the GUSD YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel and it will be uploaded there. For the juniors in the room, this summer, the third week of July, GUSD is hosting an in-person 4-day college and career readiness boot camp, where we will walk you through the career and college exploration as well as the college application. So stay tuned for that messaging. It will also be shared through Parent Square. If you are not subscribed to Parent Square, please talk to your counselors. If you are wanting to brainstorm which activities or clubs to join, also please talk to your counselors. They are a really great resource. Okay, thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you.